everybody. Welcome to the Paranormal Chop Shop. Thank you for coming and joining us. It's going to be an awesome night tonight for a lot of different reasons. Number one, Enzo's here.
Hello,
Number
everyone.
two, Roach is back. Look at
What's up?
these guys wanted to talk about some woo. They wanted to talk about some cryptids, and I said, "Okay, we got it. We got the guy that knows Mothman better than anybody." Our guest tonight is Steve Ward, just fresh from the Mothman Festival in West Virginia last weekend, and he came on to tell us a little bit about that and a whole bunch of other good stuff about the Mothman. So we're going to go ahead and bring Steve in with us right now, and Roach and Enzo, thank you again so much for you guys joining me and co-hosting this. I really appreciate it. Of course, we miss Sunny, but you guys are awesome to help out. Thank you.
Anytime.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Ward. Steve.
Great to be here.
Oh, man, awesome to have you. So I am not an expert on Mothman, but I know Enzo is very knows a lot about it, more than I do. And Steve, I was just wondering if you would tell us a little bit. I don't know any. I would like you to tell me if somebody did know anything about Mothman.
Well, back many years ago, back in the 1960s, and if you guys want to stick around later, I will tell you many stories about the 1960s. Mid 60s, November 1966, was the first kind of major flyover of the Mothman. I was actually in junior high in high school, in school, and this thing hit the wire services all over the world, and two couples were chased by this winged cryptid down Route 62 out of the North Tnt Area, out of before just south of Northport Pleasant, and they had seen this winged cryptid. Lead growing eyes, 10, 7, 6 foot tall creature. And they were chased down Route 62. And this thing hit the wire services all over the world. And whatever this thing was 6 to 7 foot tall, red glowing eyes, red sort of a humanoid shape, and 10 foot 10-foot wing foot span, and they chased them back into town into Point Pleasant. And so whatever this thing was, it was seen several times over the next year. And John Keel was the man that wrote the Mothman Prophecies. He came down about shortly thereafterwards and wrote a book which wasn't actually published till almost 10 years later, about this strange cryptid. And a lot of people have seen winged cryptids over the past several years. They have kind of dubbed it Mothman, but it almost seems like this was a kind of a unique event. And it may not be exactly the same thing. But John Keel documented several, almost a little over 100 different reports over the last, over that year, that 1966 to 1967, about this strange creature. And he talked to several people that were very credible. They actually talked about the same kind of cryptid, and at least visually, and although its experience didn't seem to be the same thing. And so that's when he it was almost 10 years later that he wrote the book The Mothman Prophecies, to document these strange events.
Mothman Prophecies was a book or just a movie?
Book. It was a book published about mid 70s, 66, 67. And then it was years later that they wrote that they created the movie. I was absolutely fascinated by the book. I had been following John Keel for many years, and he it was almost a decade after the events of the Mothman Prophecies that he actually wrote the book. And it was really fascinating because there were a lot of different things that seemed to be happening in the same general area in Point Pleasant and the Ohio Valley. Not just the Ohio Valley, actually, but many, many bizarre things were going on. You had UFO sightings going overhead. You had men in black encounters. You had poltergeist phenomena, all kinds of strange things that seemed to occur in this specific area. And that was many years later, what was it, 2003, when they made the film, The Mothman Prophecies, which did capture some elements of the book. And actually, John Keel, it turned out, was very pleased with the film, even though they updated it and they had his character married and so forth. He thought that Hollywood had captured some of the essence of the original experience that he went through. And most notably, he admitted he was incredibly paranoid with what had happened to him during that time period.
Yeah, I agree. It was there were a lot of very close similarities between the book and the movie. I read it when I was a kid. I actually grew up in Ashland, Kentucky, so just short trip down the road from where you're at right now, and grew up on Mothman stories. And my small school library just had like a couple of UFO books and the standard, Bigfoot, Nessie, UFO type combination book in the library. And our library, I read the 3 or 4 books we had, and the librarian was like, "Hey, we've got this new book. It's more of a local history thing, and I think you would like it. The Mothman Prophecies is local history." So I read Keel's book as like in the 6th grade, and was just fascinated with the topic ever since. And like you say, it is a cornucopia of the strange, where he encountered a little bit of everything from, like you said, cryptids and UFOs. And that was the first time I'd even heard the name Men in Black used. It's a pretty wild ride, that book. I should probably give it a reread years later now.
So I've never read it or saw the movie. I see that Richard Gere, isn't it?
Yeah, he was in that.
From Officer and a Gentleman, right?
Yeah, Richard Gere.
That same guy.
Is it more of him like investigating, trying to figure out what's going on? Is that what the premise of it is?
Yes.
Well, he played a character called John Klein instead of John Keel. And he was very much the John Keel character, where he's in the midst of this a bizarre series of phenomena that he's trying to deal with. And he becomes his character becomes intertwined with many other individuals, where he's very concerned about what might happen to them. He doesn't know what's going on. So that part of it was actually very close to the John Keel character. There was another interesting character in the film played by, played by Alan Bates. And his name is Dr. Leek, which is Keel spelled backwards. And I remember hearing John Keel on the Coast to Coast AM back in 2002 or 3 when the film was coming out, where he was talking about the film. He hadn't done any interviews for a long time. And he was talking to Art Bell about it, Art Bell didn't know anything about the Mothman, which I thought, how's that possible?
I know, that's surprising.
Since the mid-'60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he said that not only did he think that the film caught the kind of essence of the book, some of it, but he really liked the John Keel character, John Leek, or the Dr. Leek character, because he thought that he said he thought that Dr. Leek was much like himself. So, and that was played by Alan Bates, and a great character. And there's a great interchange between John Klein, played by Richard Gere, and Dr. Leek, played by Alan Bates. So both characters kind of represented a certain aspect of John Keel.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I'm just thinking about it because I was telling these guys before we started, I'm in film school doing script writing, and seeing how they could take one guy and split him into two characters is it's pretty interesting.
They did a good job, actually.
Yeah.
Steve, if you wouldn't mind, maybe a little bit more. You touched a little bit on one of the singular sightings, talking about that. Maybe just give us a rough sketch of things leading up to the bridge incident and stuff like that, which is covered in the movie and things like that, sort of. But with the historical reference, if you wouldn't mind, just.
Well, the first major sighting took place on November 15th, 1966. The Scarberries and the Mallets were in an area called the Tnt Area. Now, the Tnt Area had been nicknamed that for decades. It was an area back in World War II where they made munitions, explosives for the World War II effort. And by the mid-1960s, it was there wasn't much left there anymore. If you look at the old photographs back in 1944, you see this incredible complex of buildings and so forth where they made munitions for the war effort, and they stored them in a series of bunkers or igloos, they call them today's concrete igloos, where they stored these munitions. But in '66, there wasn't much there. These things had been overgrown with foliage because back in the day they didn't, in case the enemy had gotten this far into the U.S. and flown over the Tnt Area, it would look just like terrain and so forth. So it had, and to this day, it still has 100 of these bunkers out there that and some of them are actually accessible where you can go in and take a look at them. But back then it was pretty desolate, and they would go out. It was kind of a lover's lane area. So the Scarberries and the Mallets, there were two married couples. They were cruising along, looking to see if they could find some of their friends. They came along the road where the Old North Power Plant used to stand. Now, that thing's been gone since the 1960s. I was actually down there in 1977. I went down after I read the book, The Mothman Prophecies, to kind of check out the area. But they drove along this road, and Linda Scarberry actually said, "Who's that man standing there?" And there was a shadowy figure standing in the road, which turned out to be this creature. All of a sudden, it spread its wings. They could see these mid wearing airs in these mid glowing eyes, and they got really freaked out by it. Whatever this thing was, it started to shuffle off toward the Old North Power Plant, and that's the last they saw it until they took off into town, and it started to chase them.
Amazing.
In the next year or so, the year of the Garuda, as John Keel would call it, up to December of 1966, when the bridge actually collapsed. A little over 100 people saw this thing, and the general descriptions were about the same: 6-7 foot tall, red glowing eyes, 10-foot wingspan, but the behavior was very strange. Some people saw it not actually flap its wings when it took off. It would put its wings behind it, take off straight like a helicopter, and then just kind of fly away. Also there were some other strange aspects. John Keel, actually got some descriptions of this thing being of people hearing kind of a humming noise or something mechanical, depending when this thing was nearby, suggesting that this might be mechanical or something. But several people, including John Keel and another observer or investigator called Franzen from the Netherlands, from Sweden, found that several of the original witnesses would experience classic poltergeist phenomena when they had seen this thing. So I'm not sure how you put all this together and create, what was it, flesh and blood, paraphysical? What was this thing? So one of my basic tenets is to listen to the investigator for what they have felt, what they have found, what they have experienced, and whatever this thing was didn't seem to fit in a nice, neat category.
So the story you said when they were running away from it on the bridge, were they in like a vehicle or were they on foot?
On the bridge,
Yes.
the bridge came December 15th, 1967. 46 people lost their lives that night. Many people, there are people that think that this thing caused the bridge collapse. There are others that believe it was a harbinger that was warning of the bridge collapse. Others believe, like me, that think that perhaps it wasn't anything, it wasn't actually connected, but in space and time it happened, and people want to connect it in their memories. That night, it was December 15th, 1966, very cold, 20-degree weather, Michigan. The traffic going across the bridge was had to do with a lot of Christmas traffic, and then
Is this the bridge here, Steve? Or
Sorry,
is this
what?
the bridge on the screen here? Is this the one?
It looks like it. It looks like the Silver Bridge, which
Oh,
was
I was thinking of like a little wooden bridge. Like,
no,
That's
this was
huge.
it was built in, I think, in the 1920s, and but it wasn't really designed for the traffic of the 1960s. Nevertheless, the investigators said it was a 13th eye bar that failed and went down. There was a defective element in the 19th eye bar. So I don't know, but it went down on, like I say, it was December 15th, 1967. It was just after 5 o'clock. The sun was about going down. It was 20-degree weather. Imagine how the conditions when this thing went down. And I can't remember how many cars actually went down initially, but the thing is, some people call this the Mothman a harbinger. Well, I wish harbingers would be a little more specific about what's going on. Wouldn't you like them to say, "Hey, listen, the bridge is going to collapse on December 15th," or whatever? So I don't know if that's the case or not. I don't know if there was actually any connection, but there were. I actually talked to a gentleman back in 1967 who survived the bridge collapse. He was Bill Edmondson. He was crossing the bridge that night. He was hauling material from to a matar, a plant in Qatar. Good Lord, in Detroit, to make tires, and he was going from the Ohio side. I'm sorry, the West Virginia side to the Ohio side, and he told me, now, if you guys have seen the film, you know how Richard Gere had he has all kinds of time to warn people off the bridge. He has several minutes to say, "Hey, the bridge is going to collapse," and but in reality, it took 30 to 40 seconds. So it was, and Bill Edmondson told us how the bridge started to sway back and forth, and then it went in the water, and it tilted. His truck tilted so far that it was holding onto the steering wheel, and then everything gave loose. He is forced through the passenger window, and he actually gets free of the truck. And he told us that the currents were actually pulling him back up. Now, he also admitted that he had loosened his pants a little bit, as gentlemen will do sometimes driving. And so when he hit the water, his pants were actually dragging behind him, which sounds comical until the point where you find out that he, as he was coming up to the water, to the surface, there was some debris or something that caught him that started to pull him back in. And so he was able to kick loose. He got to the surface. His right arm is useless because it was forced through the passenger window. And he's using his left arm to hang on to some of the material that's floating on the surface. And fortunately, a tugboat captain saw him and picked him up out of the water, probably moments before he would have died of hypothermia. So that really brought it home for me. I mean, I had listened to several accounts of people. John Keel has a chapter in the book, The Mothman Prophecies, about what happened when the bridge went down. But that really brought it home for me to talk to this gentleman who was 88 when I talked to him, which means he was 38 when he was crossing the bridge that night. And he told me one other thing. He said that about 5 years later, he was in a horrible accident in a truck. He was trapped in the cab for about 3 hours. And he told himself, if I get out of this, I will never drive a truck again. And he never did. So a great man. He was there that day on the 2017, to pay his respects to those that had died, wondering, why did I survive? And he was just a really a great man there with the support of his family, and paying homage to those that had survived the bridge collapse.
I saw on here they have a statue in Point Pleasant. Is that supposed to be the size, like the scale of what they think, how big it is?
Well, it's a very stylized representation of the Mothman. You'll find that there are the Mothman Museum, who was created by Jeff Walmsley. Jeff and Carolyn Harris were the two people that created the Mothman Festival, which was this past year was absolutely phenomenal. I've never seen.
It looks like a really good time. I saw some pictures.
Well,
from
the
last
sculptor's
week.
last name was Roach.
Yes,
for the
Bob
statue.
Roach created the statue, and several years ago. And I saw his daughter not too long ago, Kelly, and she. Anyway, he created this great statue, very stylized, the same way that many of the T-shirts are very stylized about the Mothman, about what Mothman looked like. He was a very. The actual description was he was very much more simple. He was 6 to 7 foot tall. Almost looked like a giant owl. It almost looked like his eyes were sunken in his chest. So this is a very cool statue, and I actually worked at the Mothman Museum on some weekends, and it's a lot of fun because you can take people back into the museum area. They have an area up front that has a great, T-shirts and everything Mothman. Very well done, very, very high quality. But you get back into the museum part, and you get Jeff Walmsley has captured all of the document, the documents, the newspaper recordings, and so forth, and many different videos of all things Mothman. But and sometimes I'll step outside, and because there's a lot of people out there getting their picture by the Mothman Festival, I will offer to take their pictures so that they can all get it together. And
I
now
this
I
one.
have to tell you, I always tell people that they need to step around to the back of the Mothman statue. Now, I don't know if you know what is back there, but Bob Roach saw fit to, how can I say this? Mothman's posterior is quite memorable. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
I want people to get the full Monty, so to speak, when they go there. So I have them step around behind, and a lot of people will have their picture taken back there. But it's Jeff and his crew and his family have done a phenomenal job of putting all this together. They have that one image you're showing right now has the original writings of the people that went after they saw this creature. They came down into Point Pleasant, talked to the police down there, and they separated them, and they all wrote their individual experiences about what they saw. So Jeff has all that stuff there, including he has a great wall on the back that shows the memorabilia of the film, The Mothman Prophecies, which, of course, I can't believe it's almost 20 years old now. It was about 2002, I think it came out. So He's really done just a, he was actually 6 years old when the bridge went down, and I believe he actually heard the crash when the bridge collapsed, and he was one of the main witnesses was Linda Scarberry, and he was her paper boy. So you talk about somebody that was in the midst of all this when it was happening was Jeff Walmsley.
Huh. Now,
The museum looks awesome.
It does. I heard you say something about it had a resemblance sort of to an owl, right?
Well, the way it
Some
looked,
features.
yes, it's the eyes almost looked like it was sunken down in its chest, and but it was 6-7 feet tall, so I don't know that you could really.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure that when people were at a peak of I don't know what you want to call it, hysteria.
Yeah, that's a good
I'm
word.
sure some people saw maybe a sandhill crane in the shadows or or a owl. They thought, well, maybe that's the Mothman. Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
it
let's face
reminded me of.
Go ahead.
It reminded me. I got my first thing I ever looked into was called the Hopkinsville Goblin,
Right.
and a lot smaller of a creature than the Mothman, but their only explanation they could come up with was owls. If
Oh,
it
really?
wasn't, yeah. So like they were saying how the way their eyes were, and their ears, and they're like, oh, it had to be an owl, right? And so when you said owl, I was like, oh, I remember something else being related to an owl, even though way smaller than the Mothman was. Like these things were like little hobbit-sized things.
Some of them claimed that they were escaped monkeys from a zoo.
Yes, I read that one too.
Man, I don't know what the hell they were, a alcoholic fantasy or whatever, but monkeys, I don't think so.
As far as the Mothman tale, as it goes, the way I always remember it when I was a kid was lots of activity leading up to when the bridge collapsed, and then nothing after that. That's not exactly true, though, is it?
Well, I think that there have been some sightings afterwards. Certainly, the bridge collapse focused everybody's attention on. I mean, especially the locals. I mean, it was just a horrific event to have family and friends go down on the bridge and have that happen right there in that small community. There hasn't been a lot of, as far as I know, there hasn't been a lot of activity. I actually live down here now. I'm actually living on the fringes of downtown Point Pleasant, deep in the Ohio Valley. I came from Michigan. I used to come down all the time from Michigan for the Mothman Festival, to meet friends down here and so forth. So I never dreamed I would actually, nobody actually goes to live in their vacation spot, but I kind of did that. So, but I'm just on the very fringes of downtown Point Pleasant. I'm actually on the road where the Scarberries and the Mallets were chased by the Mothman. And so I'm a few streets from where the old Silver Bridge used to span from 6th Street over to Ohio. Well, now it's further downriver, but I'm just a few streets from that now. So I'm right in the heart of Mothman country. And no, I have not seen the Mothman. I have a lot of traffic that goes by here, but nothing too exciting. But yes, that was the main event was where things sort of culminated, not completely, but I know people that go out to the Tnt Area to this day, which is 6 or 7 miles north of here, and they get a lot of EVPs. They believe they have seen shadow people. I haven't heard many reports of the Mothman, though. It almost seems like that was an era, a time in space where it was seen, but not so much anymore.
I noticed in the museum there they had a display of the Men in Black, and I was curious, what role did the Men in Black have in this story of the Mothman?
Well, John Keel, when he talked about the Men in Black, used as kind of a generic term because there were a lot of instances where people would see a UFO or have some kind of encounter. Some mysterious strangers would show up, not necessarily literally in black or with black fedoras, but maybe an Air Force officer or whatever, or someone that appeared to be an Air Force officer and would question
that
them.
looks good.
There were a lot of strange people. Look, let's face it. Sometimes it might have even been real religious missionaries out there trying to pass a Bible along that people thought were these men in black. But there were a lot of these individuals. Now, it's funny because Jeff told me that one time his mom saw the display in the Mothman Museum of the man in black. He's got the mannequin, he's got the dark suit, he's got the sunglasses and the fedora. And she said, well, what's that all about? So he kind of told her a little bit about the lore of the men in black that showed up in Point Pleasant in the mid 60s. And she said, oh, I remember seeing those guys. And he said, Mom, you know how long I've been in this and you haven't told me about this? Where did you see these guys? Well, near Mary Hyer's office. Now, if you know the book, Mary Hyer was the reporter, the friend and colleague that he had in Point Pleasant. And she was the one that was a stringer for the Athens Messenger. And she had a column called Where the Waters Mingle, because that's where the Kanawha and the Ohio River come together. And she was the one that had many of the reports of Mothman, of the Men in Black, of the UFOs and so forth. And she wasn't afraid to publish them. And so that was interesting that she said she saw them by Mary Hyer's office, because in the Mothman Prophecies, it's described how she had these really bizarre encounters with these people that suggested that she not keep publishing these accounts. And, look, I mean, we don't really know what happened. It could be that, as you guys know, this realm does attract a certain element of people that might be a little bit off. Is that fair to say? And
a little fringy.
We're sitting right here, Steve.
Well, I'm definitely one of them, as you can tell.
Welcome.
So who knows what really was going on there? But these okay, my cats are attacking my hearing aid here. Okay, good.
They've been giving us a great illusion of the windswept backdrop though, the entire time. It's been great.
Yes, I know. That's how much I spent for special effects. But
it's like, wow, these cats are really trained well.
yes, it's a
flapping wings are great.
By the way, about the Mothman Prophecies, Brent Rains, who has trying to think of his online magazine, Alternate Perceptions magazine. He was a friend of John Keel for many years. Never met him, but they had many conversations on the phone and a lot of correspondence. He wrote a book called John Keel, The Man, the Myths, and the Ongoing Mysteries. And John Keel told Brent Rains that if he had written everything that happened about the Mothman Prophecies in that year, it would have easily filled 6 books. Now, as it was, the editors, those faceless editors that John Keel would talk about, cut out half his book. So half of the Mothman Prophecies was laying on the cutting room floor. Now, fortunately, about 2/3 of that was resurrected in his follow-up book called The Eighth Tower. And so there was... And also, you might want to check out those 2 books called The Big Breakthrough and The Big Blackout, which have been published. And those are some of the writings of John Keel that became the Mothman Prophecies. There was a lot of stuff in there that didn't make the final cut. And it deals a lot with the stuff that was going on with John Keel. John Keel was, the prophecies part of the Mothman Prophecies dealt with a lot of individuals that were that firmly believed they were in contact with some other intelligence. whether it be a real intelligence or be some kind of a channeling aspect or whatever. They did not care if anybody believed them or not. That's why he called them silent contactees. They went about their business contacting these other intelligences or whatever they were, and sometimes these entities or what have you would give them these bizarre goals. One lady was supposed to find some kind of a crucifix in Brooklyn. Uh, Other people were actually given certain specific prophecies. That's where the prophecies came from. And sometimes these prophecies would even come true. But then there came to be a certain point where, you might get the guy that has believed several prophecies, and then the Space Brothers or whoever they actually were said, "Oh, hey, listen, you gotta take everybody to this hill because the world's going to end, and the Space Brothers are going to come down and pick you up." And that, of course, didn't happen. So it was very interesting the way that he was in contact with so many of these people that really believed that they were in contact with some other intelligence or power or whatever. So, but those other books kind of they also give you a look into John Keel, how he was some of the people he was talking to, he would say, "Well, I wonder if this person is telling me the truth." But this one particular lady, Jay Perro, who is also mentioned in the Mothman Prophecies, he said, "Well, how could she possibly know some of these things? Some of the things that that were going on, he kept very close to his vest, where other people simply wouldn't have known, but she seemed to know, and some of the other people knew." So it was just it's not a straightforward ET is coming to check us out and take us aboard the spacecraft and maybe give us one of those unscheduled medical examinations. No, thank you. So it's a fascinating book, and if you read, Keel has they republished many of his articles throughout the years from different magazines, and those are very valuable to look at. I mean, Keel was not static in his thinking; he entertained a lot of ideas, but I think he was ahead of everybody else by probably about a century.
I agree. He was Fox Mulder before there was a Fox Mulder. It seemed he was really on a bleeding edge of a lot of things.
Yes.
Especially as far as paranormal investigations and things like that. He kind of blazed a new trail all on his own.
Yes, absolutely.
I know there were a lot of things in several of his books. A lot of it centralized in your general area, that West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, West kind of an area. There's a lot of other things similar, or at least cryptid-wise, in that area. There's one, it's the Hodag or Hodag. I don't recall what it was, but are you familiar with any of the other tales in that area besides just the Mothman?
Well, there's the Hodag. Is that what you're thinking
Maybe
of?
that's what I'm thinking of. It might be
I think Wisconsin claims the Hodag.
I thought that
Hodag.
was something else.
I actually saw when I was at the Mothman Festival just a couple of weeks ago. The Hodag gang. They were
I think
there,
that's actually where I saw. They had a car. They had a big truck or something like that with a sign.
big
What is
green
that?
on four legs. I'm not sure. I think that's one of those things that may have started as a hoax, but what the heck? Doesn't matter. They've got this great Hodag store up in Wisconsin. I was at the Van Meter Visitor Festival last weekend, where there's another winged creature from 1903 that was talked about. So the Hodag is definitely a part of Wisconsin lore.
Okay, that was my mistake.
And it's funny because was it last year when we didn't have the festival? It was shut down. I was out. A bunch of us came down anyway for the festival, and we're standing out there by the museum and the Mothman statue. And we look over, and we see about three guys in Hodag costumes all paying homage to the Mothman Festival. They're all bowing down, and another guy's photographing it for posterity, I guess.
Of
But
course.
I've met the guys that run the Hodag store up in Wisconsin. Great guys, and it's great that they're carrying on the tradition of the local cryptid for their area. But yeah, in West Virginia there was. Well, I've been told that during the Mothman, during the Mothman era, there was UFOs. There were areas, farms, and so forth, where all kinds of bizarre things were going on. Other people had mysterious visitors visit them. There was some also said there was actually a Bigfoot type creature seen around the area. But you might be thinking of
Jeez.
1952 September, the Flatwoods Monster. That's another bizarre creature or cryptid or alien or whatever that was seen in September of 1952. Several kids were playing at the high school. They saw this. It was like a classic. It was like the Invaders from Mars with Jimmy Hunt, where the saucer comes over and buries itself into the ground. I don't know if you remember that movie.
I do remember that movie.
I actually got to meet a few years ago Jimmy Hunt that played it was a little boy during that.
Really?
Great guy, man, and has great memories of that film. But the one a bunch of the kids came up to the hill. It was getting dark, and they saw this creature that it's hard to know if the stylized representation of it is true or not. It had kind of a round head, orange glowing eyes, almost like a skirt or whatever at the bottom, and it had a foul smell. The dog ran away, and several of these people were interviewed years later that said that they actually saw it. Frank Fascino was someone that wrote a book called The Braxton County Monster. It was in Braxton County. Other people think it was more. Frank Fascino seems to think it was actually a physical, nuts and bolts, flesh and blood alien. Other people think it was more of an apparition. But I think. Trying to think what else comes from West Virginia. But yeah, West Virginia is and by the way, a lady named Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who left us a few years ago. She was a friend of mine. I met her at the Mothman Festival. She was talking about certain areas in West Virginia and near the Pennsylvania border of these areas where all these bizarre things seem to congregate. That's my main focus. You've got cryptids, you've got strange lights in the sky, and you've got all these things that come together in a specific area. Why is that? A lot of people don't want to connect the dots, but Keel did back in when he wrote Trojan Horse. Charles Fort did back in the early 1900s when he wrote his books. So I tend to think that these things may have some connection. Although, if you were to ask me to explain it, I don't think I could.
That's the thing, is nobody can explain it. I've always felt like there's been some similarities with that central part of West Virginia, especially because I kind of grew up there. I've got a lot of relatives, mostly dotted around the Charleston type area.
Okay.
A lot of tales. My grandma, I'd always visit with my grandmother. She lived in Cross Lanes, and she was always like, when it would start to get dark, it's like, "Hey, you get in here, them haints will get you."
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a big one on the haints. But
What's the haint?
She might have been right.
Might have been. It's basically like a ghost.
Right.
Sort of like haunt and haint were kind of
okay.
interchangeable. So something like that. That's at least how she described it to me, as she was whacking me in the back of the head to get inside.
Yeah, we just
Mostly it was to keep me from getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, I think is really what it was. But yeah, there's a lot of stories, a lot of tales of like old, abandoned mines that were abandoned because of supposedly creatures coming up from the lower depths, kind of the stories and things like that.
Well, one time at the end of a Mothman Festival several years ago, Rosemary and some other friends of mine were approached by a young lady that said, now it was near the Charleston area. She said that she was seeing something that looked like, and her description was similar to a Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil had wings and had kind of a horse head or whatever, kind of a cousin, I guess, to the Mothman or some other winged creatures. And so we went out there, and we were just talking to the family in general. And these people they had all kinds of things going on. They were finishing each other's sentences. They were talking about the holler and the things that they would hear down there, the different creatures. They saw a classic UFO on their property, and they saw some kind of a shadow figure passing over the land. It was just bizarre. There's just no way they could have staged that. And this is basically in a holler near Charleston. And Rosemary also found other areas where, again, all these things seem to congregate in the same geographic area. And we have to wonder, why the heck is that?
Hey Steve, if I could add one
Sure.
little thing that I think might have sometimes we do a lot of different shows about Bigfoot and Dogman and cryptids and aliens and all this, and a lot of times people that are doing the research on these cryptids and phenomena, they'll find out the folklore of like Native Americans that have been there way, way, way before us, and that a lot of times there's stories that the Native Americans tell us about these creatures. And as far as the Mothman goes, I know that there was a Chief Cornstalk, a Shawnee tribe leader, that had something to do with this in West Virginia in the 1700s, and in regards to Mothman. What do you know about the Chief Cornstalk?
Well, actually, if you walk just not very far from where I live, you go down to Tnt Park, and that's where the two rivers come together, the Ohio and the Kanawha. And actually, a lot of people think that when you have the confluence of the rivers, that seems to stimulate a lot of paranormal activity. Well, right at that park is where Chief Cornstalk is actually buried. In the 1700s, he was actually he was a Shawnee chief. He was a peacemaker. He was trying to negotiate peace between the settlers and the Native Americans, and he was betrayed and murdered. Now, some people believe that he uttered a curse very dramatic. He uttered a curse before he died, and that somehow sent this taint along the land. It wouldn't explain why there are so many other areas that have these bizarre experiences. But actually, a gentleman I know, Denny Bellamy, who is one of he runs the tourist bureau here. They were tearing down an old church. I'm sorry, an old school, and in the wall they found an old like a closet that was all boarded up. They found all kinds of great books and all this stuff that had been forgotten. Well, what they found was a play that was written dramatizing Chief Cornstalk, and that he uttered this curse before he died. It seems to be that was just fictional, that he actually did not utter a curse, and that Chief Cornstalk has nothing to do with the bizarre incidents that happened here. But I actually know a young lady who is I don't know how many, 7 or 8 great granddaughters removed from Chief Cornstalk. And she also says the same thing. She says there's no way that the tradition of those people was that they would not have uttered a curse. So, but anyway, it makes great theater, made a great play back in the 1920s, but probably not real. But you don't really need a curse to have these. Look, we have the Skinwalker Ranch. We have Marley Woods. We have the Bridgewater Triangle. We have all kinds of things in the literature where these bizarre events seem to all occur at the same time. So I don't think we can blame Chief Cornstalk, although it would be very theatrical if we could.
Now, Steve, I was just looking up the last Mothman reported sighting, and it came up with Woodstock, Illinois in 2019.
There's been a lot of sightings of what they, a lot of times we have these winged creatures, these winged cryptids that people want to dub Mothman. Well, I get
Okay.
a little proprietary, is that the word? Where I think, hey, this is our Mothman here. Mothman wasn't anywhere else. But also, you have to be very careful in the general Chicago area. There have been a lot of reports about the Mothman, about some kind of a winged cryptid. I
Right.
know a young lady named Allison Jornlin who did a lot of investigating into that area. She actually has investigated over 60 sites where this thing is supposed to have been seen. It seems that, well, now I also know two other people that are connected to MUFON, and they have said that some of the original sightings came from the same IP address.
Oh,
So it's the suggestion is that some of these things were fabricated. Some.
that's what makes it so hard in this community, isn't it? Like,
Oh yes, that's you've nailed it. Because you do get people that fake stuff and that will spin a tale, and then how do you? It's so hard to separate that from
yeah,
the
you end up
actual.
filtering through the crap just to
Yes.
for
So
year. You could spend years in it, can't you? Like, just
well, yeah, you can actually come to the point where you can't really decide what's true and what's not. So
Yeah.
I'm actually a little skeptical of most of the reports that come from that region, even
Okay.
though some of them may be. Actually, Alison Jornlin found a couple that she thought were legitimate, but some of the other ones, when somebody makes up a tale, they don't get the all the particulars correct. Well, she found some of that where the area, the buildings or whatever weren't quite right, and you think, oh, maybe that's not right. So she and another lady named Kimberly Poppy went out and they did a lot of footwork, and I think unfortunately I have to look at that general area around Chicago, and I just kind of ignore it, which is
I
unfortunate.
don't blame you.
If you've got some people that have actually had a serious anomalous encounter, I just don't know.
Right.
And also, if you go back, John Keel in one of his chapters in the Mothman Prophecies, he has a chapter called "The Flutter of Black Wings" or something like that, and he goes back in time and talks about all these other some bizarre encounters with, in quotes, winged weirdos, and I mean everything from like thunderbirds. There was one where this guy had seen a large bird several times, and he said, "You know what? That's too much tomfoolery for a man of 50 to take." Well, I'm pushing 70, so I think that's a lot of tomfoolery for somebody to take.
I think I'm gonna buy the book. I got a
It's
flight on Monday, so
it's a fascinating book, but anything by John Keel, if you look at his various articles, there's several collections of his articles over the years. And again, his thinking wasn't static. He would present other ideas, but he kind of gravitated away from the extraterrestrial hypothesis at the end of the 60s when he experienced the things in Point Pleasant. He didn't completely reject the notion. Years later, he left the door open. He thought that there was more than one. That's one thing I firmly believe. There's more than one answer to some of these things.
right.
So, but yeah, he was. And then I highly recommend Operation Trojan Horse. That's the book that messed me up. I was a very happy ET guy. These things are coming from ET. I'm reading Lorenzen's books on flying saucer occupants, where they would talk about the landings and seeing some kind of a UFOnaut nearby the craft. But then Trojan Horse kind of pulled everything together. And then I was in recovery from that book, and I read Jacques Vallée's Passport to Magonia. I don't know if you're familiar with that book or not, but he connects various traditions and folklore with some modern day UFO experiences. And so after that, I was there was no going back.
And Keel wrote both those.
No, the Jacques Vallée wrote Passport to Magonia.
Okay. So should I read Trojan Horse before I read Mothman Prophecies, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter. Well, you know what? It might help. It might help build up to the Mothman Prophecies, because if you read that cold after it, I mean, before anything else, it it could it could overload your circuits. You think, what is this crap? And you might throw it in the basket. So read Trojan Horse first. Actually,
You
actually,
said cold. I thought you were going to go somewhere else, but okay.
Actually, the book that I read before that was called Strange Creatures from Time and Space, which had this great Frank Frazetta painting on the cover. And that in more recent years, it's been retitled The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. And it's in a trade paper size, different cover. But that's where he first starts talking about window areas, trying to come to grips with how is it that these things seem to sort of pop in and pop out? What's going on there? I mean, even with cryptids, you have footprints that start nowhere, end nowhere, UFOs that seem to appear and disappear, even change their shape. And the other thing he noticed was that if you look at charts of people that have reported craft, UFOs or whatever, there are so many different shapes, so many different specific shapes of these things. Now, in general, you get cigar-shaped, saucer-shaped, egg-shaped, or whatever. But when you get down to the specifics, it's like, what the heck? Is this a grand central station for all these races to come to see us? And even the UFOnauts don't always, while they have general categories that are the same, they don't all, they're not all the same. So that's one of the things he was looking at. Also, he found that if you look at these window areas and you go back in time, there were other things that were going on at the time, like the beliefs in the elementals, the fairy peoples, and other people. So I'm glad I read UFOs. I'm glad I read Strange Creatures from Time and Space first. That prepared me a little bit. And I will confess something. When my buddy and I heard that Trojan Horse was out, it had been out for a few years. I hadn't read it. And we were kind of bad-mouthing Keel a little bit, thinking, what's this guy doing? Putting all these things together. We might as well just give up. What's this guy thinking? Anyway, so once I read it, I thought, okay, he's got a good point here. And again, I think Keel is probably a century away from a century ahead of so many other people with some of his thinking.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's only within the last few years, especially with the tales coming out of Skinwalker Ranch, where
Yes.
it's very similar to what everything we were just been talking about with the greater West Virginia area. You've got the whole, cryptids, you got paranormal, you got UFOs, you've got ghosts, you have all these things kind of all in this very small area. It just seems impossible that it would be 5 or 6 separate things that just happen to be all happening right in one area.
Right.
There's got to be some connective tissue with all of these things. It can't be 5 separate things, could it?
Right.
I don't think so. I think that there's I spoke at the Beast of Bray Road conference, the last 2 conferences, October and in April, and I got to go to Lee Hample is a gentleman who owns a farm just a stone's throw from Bray Road. Now, if you guys know about Bray Road, Linda Godfrey is the one that wrote back in the 90s, The Beast of Bray Road, and several other books where she's documenting these incredible reports of these upright canids. People will see this mangy-looking dog along the side of the road, and then this thing will stand up all of a sudden on 2 legs. And there's a lot of other things associated with it. But Lee Hample, he was he had degrees in mathematics and chemistry. He was a mathematics teacher for decades. This guy has a scientific approach. He got this land from his, I think, inherited from his mother about 2011. Again, right near Bray Road, east of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, when these things are going on. And after a few years, some of his friends said, "You know what? You've got a werewolf in those woods back there." and Lee's going like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Well, after a while, he saw this thing, this upright canid, a couple times. He's even had missing time. So he got a hold of Linda Godfrey after these things started happening. And he told Linda, he said, if I had encountered this a few weeks earlier, I would have thrown your books in the trash. But he's experiencing this on his land. He set up all kinds of trap cameras. He's got the thing is that whatever these creatures are, they're very hard to capture. It's almost like there's some intelligence or something blocking the photographs of these things. Once in a while he gets a shadowy outline. He's kept a lot of these photographs close to his chest. You can see some of them on. He was on Coast to Coast AM not too long ago, a couple of months maybe, and he allowed me in my presentation to use some of his photographs. But I have been there at his farm. I have sat there for 2 hours a couple different times, and he shows these photographs that he's captured over the last 10 years, and they're mind-blowing. Not only is he getting hints of these things with footprints and so forth, there's some kind of technology or there's sometimes when you see this like a bell-shaped object and other things. He hasn't let too many of those out, but he has photographs of this thing starting in the snow in the middle of nowhere and then ending nowhere, in the same way that some Bigfoot researchers out in the Sierra Nevadas have found the same thing. And it's just, and the footprints are 5-toed with a pad and a heel. He has presented them to the DNR and to universities and so forth, and they just don't even want to look at them. They say, well, it must be some kind of two different animals stepped in the same footprint and created this anomaly. Well, he's got them going on for hundreds of feet. So
weird.
And then he has had, he's out in the middle of nowhere. He's had several roadkill deer that he's put on his property. Well, you can see the photograph where it's night. You see the carcass laying there. A little while later, you can see the timestamp where the mist shows up, and then the carcass is gone. No drag marks, no footprints. A dozen times this has happened. So he doesn't know what's going on in his property. I don't know what's going on, but it's just bizarre. And whatever these creatures are, they act like animals. They eat roadkill and bait. It's not like they're the intelligence behind these things going on in the background. So that's just, and it's too bad. He's tried to get scientists, he's tried to get universities involved with this. There's a possibility this might become a reality show. I hope so, because he's not going to release some of these incredible photographs until that happens. But it's a great, and I think Linda Godfrey was beside herself. I mean, this is like a laboratory of the stuff she's been writing about for years. She talks about Lee Hampel with a different name in Monsters Among Us. So, and a great lady. I've had a chance to meet her. But in the way she stumbled onto this dog band, so to speak, she was writing for a little newspaper in Elkhorn. I forget the name of it. The Week, I think. And people started reporting this upright canid on Bray Road. So she went to the local police there, and he actually had a file that said werewolf. Because he had been getting these crazy reports of this, whatever the hell it was. So that started her off on a journey of 6 or 8 books, and a great lady, great researcher. So it's just another one of those entries into the unknown where all this stuff seems to happen in the same area.
I was just looking, the right arm on that, right? Is that his right arm?
Yeah, it looks skeletal.
That's what I was thinking. I was like,
yeah, I don't know. I'm always I'm very hesitant on photographs because it's so easy for someone that knows what they're doing with CGI.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the worst thing about stuff today. We get high def imagery that is easily manipulated. Like when I looked at that originally, I didn't see that necessarily as a skeletal arm, but I thought maybe that was just some shrubbery in the back kind of sticking up.
Right.
It just happened.
Yeah, and then you look at his left arm, and it's like kind of similar.
Right.
But then you don't know if it's like shadows and light.
It's like if they were gonna fake it, they picked a weird thing to fake it look
Yeah.
Right. So
Right?
you just don't know. But Lee claims to have some images of this thing manifesting, coming in almost like it's coming into existence. Now, I've not seen those.
Yeah.
So I wonder, this could actually be something like that. But
Only
I mean,
partially that.
Lee is a very credible guy. I'm sure he's not spinning tails. I'm sure he's
Right.
not in his back room creating these images that I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's really a good man, and it's funny because his brother Fred, when he first told Fred that, you know what, I've got these pictures, and this thing, the footprints of this just started in the middle of nowhere. Fred said, well, maybe he parachuted in. Now, I don't think that was helpful, but Fred's got a great sense of humor.
Dog creatures. Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't it be? So earlier mentioned that might become a reality type show. I'd love to see it.
So would I.
There's a lot of programming out there. We've talked a lot about like Keel and mostly books and things like that for research purposes. But modern day, that's, a lot of folks can't be bothered to sit down and read a book. So they get a lot of their information and stuff like that from videos like here on YouTube or, documentaries or things like that.
Discovery Plus.
Yeah. I used to
there-
think
there's
Discovery
a lot
was
of
like
Discovery.
100% fact.
That's where I was going. Is
I didn't know
there's
better.
a lot of stuff out there that's kind of flooding the market. Do you view that as a good thing that it raises awareness, or a bad thing that they kind of sensationalize some things, or what do you think about all that? What's your opinion?
One aspect is it's kind of nice now that back in the old days, and you'll still get some of this, where if you told somebody the festival you went to the past weekend, your relatives and some of your friends would look at you sideways like, and you did that on purpose. It is
What, did you
more
lose a bet? Yeah,
it is more acceptable now in some ways, but
that's
I
totally
have
true.
found that people are not they're not careful about what they believe on TV sometimes. I mean, I have run into people that thought that Mountain Monsters was a real show. Okay. And I've met all those guys in some different venues. Great guys. They stay in character. But I mean, they had one episode where the chupacabras were allying themselves with the Bigfoots. I mean, okay. The first episode I ever saw was 20 minutes of the Mothman episode. And I thought, what is this crap? And I turned it off. A year later, I start watching it and I think, oh, I get it. They're just having fun. So
Yeah, to prepare for this, I was watching the BuzzFeed Mothman thing, and I'm like 10 minutes in, and they didn't even talk about the Mothman. They were talking about local food in Point Pleasant. And I was like, when are we going to get to the thing?
well, the local food during the festival is pretty good. But
Yeah, they were like eating a Mothman pizza.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the Village Pizza, which is just north of where I live. Village Pizza used to be Chinese restaurant. And if you look in the Mothman Prophecies, one of the classic sightings of the Mothman was over Chinese restaurant. And also the Scarberries and the Mallets, when they first fled the TNT area, when this thing was chasing them, they actually went to Chinese restaurant because Linda Scarberry's boss used to work there. So she told him first, and he's the one that said, you should go down to the police department and tell them what happened. So
they should have said that
so
they should have said that in the BuzzFeed thing.
Oh yeah,
It's
that would
part
be
of the
great.
lore.
It would have made sense, like, because I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't care about a pizza with olives as eyes. You know what I mean? Like, I want to hear about the Mothman.
Well, they have great food there, but I don't ever order their Mothman pizza because it has mushrooms on it. And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a mushroom guy.
My pizza's always, anybody ever knows, for everybody, extra cheese, mushrooms, and pepperoni.
Okay, we're not sharing pizza. No
Oh
offense.
boy.
More for me.
But yeah, it's there are some good. Small Town Monsters is a they did a piece that was called the Bray Road Beast. They have some of Lee Hample's photographs toward the end. They've done a couple of Mothman DVDs, documentaries. The first one is called The Mothman of Point Pleasant, which is maybe the best documentary to tell you basically what happened. In The Mothman Legacy, which is a sequel, you will actually see my handsome countenance there, pontificating on the Mothman and John Keel. But that's also pretty good. I was happy to be associated with a quality production like that. So Small Town Monsters is really a place to go for a lot of different cryptids. They do a lot of really good work. So, I mean, so you asked, the original question was, is this raising awareness, or is it? It's I guess it's twofold. I mean, yeah. It's nice that people are more aware and can talk to people about this stuff, but so much of it is I went to a conference one time. I won't say what it was, and I was sitting at a table with two guys that had been on different types of reality shows, and they told me the horror stories they went through. One guy said he was on this particular well-known show, and he came out of the house and they said, "Okay, we need you to tell us that there's a demon in that house." And he said, "But there is no demon in that house." And they argued back and forth, and he was cut from the program. The other guy was on a reality show where he said they actually had to negotiate with the producers to get closer and closer to the truth about what happened. I mean, it was a negotiation thing. What? So I just, God, the thing is that if these producers would do a reality show that was actually real, they would still get an audience, just because they don't have a titillating moment every 5 minutes where somebody says, "What is that? Did you hear that?" Or where they have to fabricate something. They're still going to get an audience, but they're going to have more credibility.
Yeah, they do have to, of course, raise money and pay those bills themselves. So there's parts of it I could kind of understand. You could maybe like say, well, this is a story, maybe do like a reenactment saying this is one of the stories about it. I could see that as a filler part versus this is our actual investigation at Haunted House A, whatever it is. And as it turns out, a lot of those investigations, it's a lot of sitting around and not a whole lot going on sometimes.
Right.
And they're not all Amityville horror.
No.
So it's it's not how it works. And occasionally they will get some amazing, fascinating stuff, but that's few and far between for over a longer investigation time. So I understand a little bit, but it's when they start inventing things, like you said, telling us there's demons in there. That's just crazy.
Anybody that really does this stuff, and I don't really do much in the way of haunted investigations or whatever, that it takes forever to find something that is legitimate. They'll look at EVPs occasionally. We went, a group of us went down to where the Silver Bridge used to stand at the Point Pleasant, and now it's downriver a ways. But we had a photograph. Somebody gave us a photograph of another group that had taken a picture down there. And the outline of the image actually looked like, apparently, a guy that actually died on the bridge. And it seemed like that was legitimate. So I was kind of taking a back seat. Some of my friends were doing the, is there anybody here? Blah, 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 that kind of thing. But then at one point I thought, I've seen enough of these shows. I know what to do, right? So, and it turned out that one of the ladies that was with us set up a flashlight just on the verge of turning on. You've seen that on shows, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden this thing came on out of nowhere. And so we turned it off, and then we were stamping our feet and trying to see if we could create a vibration to make this thing trigger. But then I thought, well, okay. And I said, if there's anybody here, would you please turn the flashlight on the count of 3? And then 1, 2, 3, bang. The flashlight came on for 3 beats and then went off. And I said, can I say holy expletive now? And everybody laughed. Later on, a friend of mine checked the tape, and he's, it's not a Class A EVP, so he doesn't know for sure, but he thought he heard a voice say, after I said that, little baby. So maybe there was somebody from beyond thinking, what are you, some kind of wimp? What's going on here? No big deal. But
Nothing like getting pulled from another dimension. That's always disappointing.
and then later on, I thought, well, I'm going to go for broke. I did it again. Anybody here? 1, 2, 3. A space of 3 beats. Then it came on for 3 beats and then went off. So it could be pure coincidence. I have no idea. That's not my area to do EVPs, that kind of thing. But hopefully somebody actually called me a wimp from beyond. That would be cool.
and caught it on tape. That would be my ringtone, I think, forever. So have you done a lot of investigations yourself?
Not a lot. I've spoken to some of the original Mothman witnesses. I'm more of a researcher than investigator. No holds barred there. So, and my passion, I guess, is not only these high strangeness areas, but you'll find that there seem to be patterns that show up in some of these things. If we talk about close encounters with UFOs and maybe interfering with the combustion engine of a car stalls. We have dozens of those cases. Well, there was one in North Cumberland, England in 1960, where Dorothy Strong is in a taxi cab, and a phantom army starts to manifest, and the cab stalls, and they feel like they're being hit by a force field, and the fare meter is going crazy. We don't know if the fare meter overcharged her or gave her a break, but
they always overcharge.
Eventually the phantom army, as it's coming toward them, it dissipates, and then it completely vanishes. Now, we've heard of stories like this from Gettysburg, phantom platoons and so forth. It's happened before in England, and this particular one was apparently the Battle of Otterburn in 1388. And they know that because it's not the first time it manifested. So that's interesting. But then we get a little weirder. We go into Marlington, West Virginia in the 60s again, 66. W.D. Doc Priestley, he's cruising along a 2-lane, and all of a sudden this is near the state forest, near Marlington. His car runs to a stalls, looks over to his left, and he sees a classic Bigfoot standing there. And its hair seems to be almost like it's static electricity. It's standing up on end a little bit. So he doesn't know how long he's looked at this thing. His buddies that are ahead of him in a hunting bus realize he's not behind them. They turn around, they're coming back. And then Mr. Bigfoot recedes into the woods. His car starts again. He doesn't say anything to his buddies. They take off. I don't know how far they get down the road. His car starts to stall again. It smokes. His engine burns out. He looks over to his left, and there's either the same Bigfoot or his kissing cousin is standing there. Now, he doesn't say anything again to his buddies till months later, because he wanted to come back to that same area and go hunting. And he thought if he told his buddies he saw a Bigfoot, they wouldn't come back. So, and then Stan Gordon, who wrote a couple books on the bizarre encounters with Bigfoot and UFOs in Pennsylvania, 73, 74. A couple other cases are there where it seems like, can't prove it, that the close proximity of a Bigfoot stalled the car. So there's a lot. And can you indulge me to tell you my favorite vehicle stoppage of all time? Okay. This goes back, and I don't know if it's true or not. It doesn't matter. It's a great story. Late 1800s, early 1900s. Elliot O'Donnell, who was basically a paranormal investigator of that time, wrote several books on that, on ghosts and so forth. He talks about his uncle, a Mr. B. Now, this is in again the same time period. We don't have the date. He's in a cart or coach or something like that on a haunted road going toward Limerick, Ireland, and the guy that's driving the coach is his servant named Dunkley. Now, look, if you're going to make up a story, you're not going to make up a name like Dunkley, right? So it's got to be real, okay? So they're cruising along. It's night, almost a full moon. Everything is copacetic. Mr. B is kind of looking backwards, and he's just enjoying the night. And all of a sudden, the cart stops dead. He turns around. The one single horse is stopped it's shivering. Something's going on. He looks at Dunkley. This poor sap is kind of in a stupor. He's got a look of terror on his face, and he can't seem to function. Mr. B looks down and he sees these little shadowy forms gathering around the cart. So he doesn't know what's going on. He turns around, grabs the reins, breaks the spell. They get out of there. Dunkley comes out of it and he says, "What did you see?" Now this is shades of Jacques Vallée, Passport to Magonia, and
Yes.
The elementals in modern day UFO experiences. Dunkley saw what he thought were a troop of fairies making merry, the little people, the elementals, and I guess they don't like it when you come upon them and they're making merry. So they looked angry. They were coming at Dunkley. They were, in his mind's eye, they were climbing on the cart, trying to pull him off. And this poor guy is terrified. So interesting that if it's true, a shared experience experienced differently by two different people. That happens a lot in the paranormal. We have people that see UFOs and some don't see them. Some see something different. Even Betty and Barney Hill did not experience exactly the same thing. While they had a shared experience, and much of it was similar. This is the couple that had the missing time in the early 60s and were in the middle 60s, were in Look magazine and had the movie and all that stuff. But there were several things that were different. One was that Barney didn't have his eyes open the whole time. He may have been unconscious part of the time. Betty was alive and awake and giving the aliens hell. But at one point, when they described the aliens, Betty said that the aliens had kind of a two slits for a nose. Barney saw them with more of a Jimmy Durante nose. Now, a lot of you young kids out there don't know who the hell Jimmy Durante was.
I know Jimmy Durante.
but his nose wasn't.
I don't have an idea.
Right. If you Google him, you'll find out that his nose was a bit prominent rather than diminutive. So it's just very interesting. Anyway, that's my favorite vehicle stoppage, even if it's totally made up.
That's pretty amazing stuff. So,
wow, he does have a. Was he a liquor drinker?
I'm sorry.
Did he drink a lot of booze?
Well, that is not covered by Elliot O'Donnell in the document. So perhaps in the sequel we'll find out.
Wow. It seems like a lot of places, these creepy places or whatever we're going to define these areas are, seem to go in cycles a lot of the time. Where do you think your area is right now in that cycle? Are you on the downside or the upside?
I remember talking to Rosemary Ellen Guiley a few years ago, and she thought that the TNT area was tapped out. So, whatever. I mean, if you go back, gosh, to be back here in the mid 60s and all the activity going on, John Keel in the TNT area where they had seen this creature, you had a bunch of people, good old boys and not so good old boys, armed with shotguns and bow and arrows, going to bag themselves a Mothman. So
it would look great on the mantle, I'll have to admit.
So Keel, Mary Heyer, the reporter, and other people, they would go down several miles south of here to Galloplus Ferry, back in the old hollers, man. And I tell you what, those hollers are still a place you can get lost in today. This is more than half a century ago. And they found and we think we found the area. This was one of the areas. Keel was was kind of vague about the places that he would go to see these things, because he knew that people like you and I would go there and try and find them, right? So this one particular place is up on a hill, and it sounds just like the area that he described in the Mothman Prophecies off 5 Mile Creek Road, although there's not technically a 5 Mile Creek Road anymore anyway. And they would, and these lights, these strange lights would go over all the time. If you go south or actually north of where I am, but kind of almost maybe it's the southern border of the TNT area, Camp Conley Road. If you read about Camp Conley in the Mothman Prophecies, the Lilly family experienced all kinds of bizarre stuff. bedroom invaders, strange lights going overhead. So it just seems like people still see things out here. They see things everywhere. But unfortunately, I'm here at a time when probably not too much is going on. So that's too bad. But
I wonder what I need to keep my eye open for on Monday when I go. I go back home to upstate New York.
well, upstate New York, they had in the 80s and 90s, they had these incredible sightings of these giant black triangles going over the freeway. I mean, hundreds of people were
Yes.
seeing these things. So, and
Hudson
also
Valley.
you've got the stone chambers up there in upstate New York. I've been to some of those where some say that paranormal activity congregates around them. So, and nobody know, they try and call them root cellars that the colonials built. They probably go back way before that. So, but you know what? It's interesting you bring that up. Back in the old days, I find myself saying that too much these days, but maybe it's been 10 years now. There was for many years there was something called the UFO News Clipping Service. It was started by Lucius Farish, I think, in Plummerville, Arkansas, and it changed hands a few times. The point is that they would subscribe to all kinds of news clipping services, put together all the UFO clippings from the U.S., from overseas, and also there was a Fortean area for things like Bigfoot and poltergeist phenomena. And for $5 a month, you could get this. And what it would tell you is that these things are going on all the time, everywhere, locally. It's just that the mainstream media wasn't always picking it up. I mean, we've heard about the Phoenix Lights, Stevensville, O'Hare, every once in a while they decide to cover the stuff. But, and some have told me, said, well, we haven't heard much about UFOs lately. Maybe they went back to their home planet. No, those, whatever the hell they are, they're here all the time.
So
and
it was the Reddit before the internet.
Yes, that's right. And it was a great resource. I have a catalog of them, kind of interrupted at times all the way back to the 1960s. But it was. It's too bad that we don't have that resource anymore, because it was phenomenal. The stuff that was going on locally, exactly the same stuff, lights in the sky, landings, abduction experiences, all the time. Whatever the source might be, I can't tell you.
But can you imagine being an experiencer and not having the internet and thinking you have nobody who's seen anything, and then you get that and you see you're not by yourself?
Yes. Well, there was a lady that contacted me several years ago, and she's from New Hampshire, from Londonderry area. And this is before she made a breakthrough. She did have a hypnotherapist that revealed what may have happened, although she takes it. A lot of these people I've talked to, not a lot, I haven't talked to too many, take it with a grain of salt. They know that these memories have come up under hypnosis, so they don't know for sure. But the thing is that this goes back to John Keel again. He had kind of I call it a catchphrase, but it wasn't really that. He would tell researchers, ask the contactee what they had for breakfast. Now, what he meant was, ask the experiencer what he or she not literally had for breakfast. He didn't care if you had post toasties or not, but find out all about that individual from childhood, because he found that people that had an abduction experience, saw a cryptid, often had these things happen throughout their life. And so I armed with that information, I asked this young lady, I said, well, I asked her a series of John Keel style questions, and even Rosemary Ellen Guiley style questions, because she found when she was investigating shadow people that a lot of people that had these shadow people experiences, whether they were in their bedroom or wherever, were also experiencing classic alien abduction phenomena, if we want to call it that. So anyway, I found out, long story, I found out that they were experiencing standard haunting phenomena in their home. Both sons were experiencing orb phenomena. One was seeing them outside his bedroom window, these golden orbs dancing around at night. The other one saw one come up to him in the house and circle him and go off into another room. She saw a shadow person move across the wall. This started with she and her husband were out on their porch one morning. They saw these strange lights coming toward them. They're near an airport. They're very familiar with the regular conventional lights. And then they all of a sudden, they weren't standing next to each other. It was a little bit lighter out because it had been early. They looked up and saw a large black triangle just brushing the tops of the trees and taking off. They went to bed, not reacting to it at the time, like, oh, no big deal. They went, as so many people do. Later on, she realized they were missing a half hour. So that's when she started to pursue this. So, and then I asked her, I said, okay, this is going to sound a little weird, but I knew that sometimes people that had these experiences had also seen some kind of a cryptid. So I asked her, I said, look, have you ever seen anything like a Bigfoot or some kind of an animal you couldn't identify? And she told me no. And then she said, oh, wait a minute. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law saw something near the property. I think this was seen 2 different times. And it was something like a Black Panther, but standing on 2 legs. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So here, if I was one of these guys frozen in the 1960s, reading the UFO Occupants by the Lorenzens, thinking UFOs were strictly ET, I never would have known to ask these questions if it wasn't for people like John Keel and Rosemary Ellen Guiley. So there is so much to this that is hidden beneath the surface that we just don't really understand. But we need to begin listening to the experiencers. And you know, because I think we all have our own, to some degree, our own ideas about what's going on, but we have to be careful. We have to temper that and listen to these particular individuals.
Totally agree.
Leave your bias at the door.
Yes, that would be good.
Yep.
I haven't always been able to do that, but I do my best.
Well, Steve, I did have one question I wanted to ask you. We've got about 18 minutes or so left of the show. What actually got you started down this path to find you where you are now? Would you have a particular experience as a kid, or how exactly did you find yourself where you are now?
I am not an experiencer, unfortunately. I've had one weird experience. Maybe I can mention that in a minute. But I'm the guy that talks to people about their experiences. I used to live in Michigan. I've been down here a few months deep in the Ohio Valley, just inches from downtown Point Pleasant. And so if you go back to the mid 60s, now I was in junior high at the time. So if you kids want to stay around longer, I'll tell you great stories about the 1960s, but because you probably don't remember the 1960s. But in March of 1966 in Michigan, we had this incredible wave of UFO reports, landings and so forth. And this is when Dr. Hynek, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, was still attached to Project Blue Book. Now, he had come to believe that there was something to this, but he still had his apron strings tied to the Air Force. They wanted him to defuse the situation. And so I remember as a kid watching this live news conference on TV where he actually uttered the phrase swamp gas. He suggested that some of the sightings might be swamp gas. And that was all the press needed for the rest, all time.
Yeah, all that it is. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting. I'll go back to my origins, but 10 years later, I got to see him speak at the Michigan MUFON Symposium in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Oh, wow. And he had long separated from Blue Book. He had the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois. And he was one of the good guys by that time. But the name of his talk at the symposium was Swamp Gas Plus 10 and Counting. And so some of it was very humorous, but a lot of it was very serious too. But so that was a big deal at the time. You know, it's funny because Hynek originally he went to the Air Force and his superiors and said, "Hey, there's a lot of stuff going on in Michigan. You want me to go there?" And they said, "Oh no, we haven't. Nobody has said anything. Don't worry about it." So then the next day, Gerald Ford, then Senator Gerald Ford, wanted to know why the hell the Air Force wasn't there investigating when some of the credible good citizens of Michigan were reporting these things. So immediately he was dispatched on a plane. But then it was a few months later, November of 1966, was the first major flyover of the Mothman, where the Scarberries and the Mallets were chased out of the Tnt area. This is even before Mothman had a legitimate name. You know, he was just the bird originally. And some creative copy editor decided to dub him Mothman because the TV show Batman was popular at the time. So it was just a little artistic license, a little fun, but it has stuck, even though Mothman doesn't look anything like a moth. But that report hit the wire services and went all over the world. I remember as a kid reading that thinking, how cool is this? A winged humanoid with red glowing eyes chasing these people down, you know, this 2-lane highway in the middle of nowhere. So that was very cool. So that, I guess, then we had our obligatory, in high school, we had a UFO club, right? We were I shouldn't admit this.
I wish my high school had a UFO club.
I know. I would have loved to have had a UFO club.
This wasn't really attached to the high school. We were actually, it was our own club during high school.
Secret
I don't think
society.
high school would have touched this with a 10-foot battle axe, you know. But we were, flying
was
saucer.
Was it called the UFO club, or did it have a?
Well, it was flying saucer was so passé, so we called it the Aerial Phenomena Investigations and Research Center, right? Well, originally we thought Aerial Phenomena Research and Investigations. Now, if you sound that out, and
high schoolers naming things better than the government.
If you sound that out, this is probably a family show. You don't want to do that. We found it wasn't very complimentary, so we switched those two letters around because you weren't dealing with a bunch of chimps, right? So, but anyway, we even published an amateur magazine for 6 issues, which you can actually find in the Gray Barker archives in Clarksburg, West Virginia, and it's pretty cool. So we even have an issue devoted to the Mothman, which I have donated to the Mothman Museum. So, but yeah, that was kind of the start. I mean, I'd heard about UFOs before and was intrigued by it. Always a guy interested in science fiction, but I think that those events of 1966 were what set me on the path of what do I want to say? Destruction. I'm not sure.
Knowledge. The path of knowledge.
Yes, there we go. That's good.
Do you have like a show you do, like where you talk about this stuff?
Yes, it's been a hiatus for a while because I moved and everything, but it's the High Strangeness Factor on the Paranormal UK radio network. It's got about 2.5 years of backlogged shows. My regular co-host is Andy Mercer, who is also my producer. The show doesn't get out there for people if he doesn't produce it. And sometimes I have other co-hosts and so forth, friends of mine. And I've had a pretty nice selection of different types of people over the...
you should get the guys from school, from the club out there.
Well, actually, I had one of the guys that was in that group, Bill. He came on one night reminiscing about the good old days, and that was a lot of fun. He's way the heck out in Wyoming now doing his own thing. But those were good times, and it was great to have him on the show.
That's awesome.
That sounds great. You also mentioned earlier that you've been speaking at some conferences and things like that. I know there's a lot of folks in our crowd here that enjoy a good conference. And actually, if you wouldn't mind mentioning a little bit about the festival itself, what are some of your favorites and don't miss type opportunities out there?
Well, I was able to speak at the Mothman Festival this year. I've been there a few times. Now, the Mothman Festival is held every third weekend in September. And Jeff Wamsley again. It was Jeff Wamsley and a lady named Carolyn Harris, who is no longer with us, that started this festival. And Jeff has established this incredible Mothman Museum. I mean, you've got the front part where you can buy the T-shirts and all the great Mothman stuff. They're very well done. But then in the background, you have the museum, which is so well put together. I mentioned earlier. The festival is you got to put it on your bucket list. Now this past one was pretty crowded, but it's again every third weekend in September. Up and down Main Street, you've got everything. You've got food, T-shirts. Sometimes you have bouncy houses. We didn't have our Stay Puft Marshmallow Man this year. I was disappointed. But you have usually in the vacant lot we had this giant Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. But you got everything you need there. Now on the perpendicular road where the Mothman statue is, that's where you'll find the speakers. That's where they usually have their tables, and they're very accessible, very interesting people. And we have speakers usually on Saturday and Sunday. And again, these are, Ken Gerhardt, Stan Gordon, Nick Redfern, A-list speakers, as well as more regional speakers that maybe you don't know so much about. It's just phenomenal. And then I have to tell you, the best part of all, you've got to get there early Saturday morning. And the only thing that costs a few bucks, buy your ticket for the TNT hayride on Saturday night. We take unsuspecting people into the dreaded TNT area at night where the Mothman was first seen. And you have 3 tractors, you have 3 carts. I usually get a couple of them are like standard hayride carts. You got your bales of hay and everything. They give me the old man cart with nice, comfortable seats. That's the one you want. And we go into the TNT area. Looks creepy in the daytime, super creepy at night. When you go in, the men in black will try to keep you from, they'll try to turn you away. Fortunately, they're more like the Keystone Cops than the men in black. Guaranteed flyover of the Mothman, and a few chills, a few scares along the way. But like I say, the area is so creepy, you really don't need anything to add to it. So it is, and you've got the area, you've got the geography, you've got the history, you've got the bridge memorial just down the street. It's just, there's so much to offer there. And you should also come off season, because sometimes it's not that easy to move around the Mothman Festival, but you should come at another time as well to kind of take in everything. Now, last weekend, I was at the Van Meter Visitor Festival. That's in Van Meter, Iowa, which is west of Des Moines, a long ways from here. That's another winged cryptid, 1903. People claim to see some kind of a bizarre cryptid that looked kind of like a pterodactyl, I guess, but it had these bizarre features. It had a horn on its nose. It had some kind of a light that seemed to emanate from its beak or whatever. And several prominent people saw it during the Week of Terror in 1903, at the end of September. Chad Lewis will take you on a tour through the Week of Terror. The town isn't very big. He can point out what the buildings used to be and so forth. And eventually you come out to the area where the mines were, where they last saw it. So it's a much smaller festival, but it's growing. Mothman has many thousands. Van Meter has several hundred. But always, it's the kind of thing that, ladies and gentlemen, that you can go to these festivals, these gatherings, and you can talk about these things again without your relatives or your in-laws or the people you work with looking at you cross-eyed like, what was in your mind when you did this? So
what is that? Oh, okay.
That's a Thunderbird.
yeah, there you go. There was actually one of the Mothman witnesses, so-called Mothman witnesses, essentially saw a Thunderbird, Tom Urey. It was misreported in the Mothman Prophecies, but he saw something with a 10 to 12 foot wingspan, and he said it wasn't an osprey, it wasn't this and that. He would take he's no longer with us, unfortunately, but I got a chance to speak to him several times. He said he would take a lie detector test over what he saw. In some of these areas, people do see a lot of strange stuff. So, and originally he thought that other people were seeing what he saw, but because of the freak out factor, they added they embellished the I don't know, the what they saw. But I actually saw him Jeff Wamsley used to have these people at a table where you could talk to some of the original witnesses. Well, one year, several years ago, he's sitting next to Linda Scarberry, one of the original witnesses, Faye DeWitt, another early witness that was not in the Mothman Prophecies. First time he had met them. Everybody thinks that Mothman witnesses all know each other, right? Well, that's not the case. But he thought that, he talked to another witness, Marcella Bennett. They were traveling to Katanning, Pennsylvania, where they actually filmed the Mothman Prophecies as a substitute for Point Pleasant. And they swapped stories, and he decided that no, they had seen something distinctly different from what he saw. So, but he did see essentially a Thunderbird.
I can't wait to one day get to the point where somebody could just say one word and it just triggers like I'm amazed at how much knowledge you put out today. And with just little keys, and it went to this story and that story. I hope to someday get there.
Well, if you're approaching 70, maybe you can do that. So maybe you want to slow down.
I'm 36. Just turned 36.
Oh, you got lots of time. No problem.
Yeah, you definitely given us a ton of information. It's fantastic. I'm going to have to listen back and take a few more notes myself, especially on some of the. I've always meant to go back and it was the 70s when I originally read Mothman Prophecies, and I always keep meaning, oh man, maybe I'll give it a reread, buy a copy or something. Now I want the whole collection. I want all of it.
I'm trying to decide if I do an audiobook or do I read.
Well, there's a lot of Keel stuff that's on Audible now. Major books like the Eighth Tower was the one where they gathered up some of the stuff they cut out of the Mothman Prophecies. Trojan Horse is there. There's at least 6 or 8 anthologies of his articles over the year. And keep in mind that he wasn't dogmatic. I mean, he wasn't static in his approach. He would present different ideas. So there might be some things that seem contradictory. But he's like all of us. He was trying to sort through this maze of what's a good word? A maze of the unknown, I guess, and trying to decipher it. So, I never got a chance to meet him. Let me tell you one other story. A friend of mine did get a chance to meet him. He went back in 1967 in New York to the Congress of Scientific Ufologists, headed by James Mosley, who was publishing Saucer News at the time. And his mom took him, but we were just in junior high. She was going to take me too, but my parents thought, no, I don't think we'll have you traipsing along New York City. But so I had to live vicariously through him. But he met all these people. He met James Mosley, Gray Barker, John Keel, and so forth. Well, the next year, he was there. He'd met a friend of his. They actually got John Keel's address. So they went to his apartment and knocked on the door cold. He said, we actually had I won't say what he said, but let's just call it the intestinal fortitude to do this cold at his apartment. And he let him in. He was very gracious. And they're all sitting cross-legged on the floor. John Keel is in his PJs. He's surrounded by hundreds of newspaper clippings, because this is some of the research he was doing that led up to Trojan Horse. And they had a great conversation for about an hour and a half. And I thought, oh man, if I could have only met John Keel, that would have been phenomenal. But I never did.
I always imagine him just buried with just mountains of clippings and books and stuff just everywhere. I always wondered if he were alive today, in his prime with the electronic age, what he could have accomplished.
I know. There is a guy named, let's see, what is it? JohnKeel.com. Doug Skinner is a guy. It's a long story. I won't go there, but he was able to preserve a lot of his stuff when he died. I mean, it was in his apartment, and it could have been lost, and I'm sure a lot of it was. But if you go to JohnKeel.com, he posts stuff about every month, and he's got an amazing amount of material. Photographs, old letters, and so forth by John Keel, and definitely worth pursuing.
I had no idea there was a JohnKeel.com. I know where I'm going to be spending the night tonight.
I haven't checked it for a while. I'm behind.
I'll throw that link, as well as I've thrown the High Strangeness Factor, a couple of different links in our chats for people to check out. Steve, we're kind of almost at the end of the show here. Do you have any closing words or final plugs? Where can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. Just punch in Steve Ward. If you put in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, you'll probably find me. I don't have a proper website. I guess what I would like to do, I will paraphrase something. We lost Timothy Green Beckley recently, another giant in the field, Mr. UFO. And he even, had contributed a chapter to one of his books on the Mothman. No surprise. But Tim essentially said that whatever this is we're dealing with, it goes along being what it is. It's not affected by our belief systems, our learned papers, our various tomes, learned tomes on all these things. It keeps on being what it is. So it behooves us to pay attention to that and not get too hung up in our, and I'm doing a big paraphrase. I'm turning a paragraph from a sentence, but it behooves us to I guess to listen to the experiencer and to try, as was said earlier, not put our own stamp, our own belief on it, and try to stand back and listen to what they're saying. Of course, we're always trying to qualify those people to make sure they're not experiencing something mundane they misinterpreted. But it's very important to listen to what they're saying. If we do that, we will start to find patterns that exist, I think, in this phenomenon.
Totally agree. That's fantastic.
Yeah, those are great inspirational closing words there, Steve. Really, everybody in the chat has just been so fascinated with the stories you've told today, the info you've given us. I mean, wow, we've got to have you back soon. We also have another show that we do every Tuesday called the Chad Smith Podcast, and I'd really like for you to meet Chad and be able to chat with him sometime. But, we just can't thank you.
Michigan.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Really appreciate it, Steve.
It was great.
Thank you for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you're awesome. We hope to have you back soon, and I'm going to go ahead and let you out here because we're going to end up closing the show. But thank you again, Steve. Have a good night.
Thanks all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Man,
See you,
that
bud.
was awesome.
Wow, info packed 2 hours there.
It seems like we get better guests every show. I don't know how Cassie does it.
She's got
She's
those
great at it.
connections, man.
Yeah.
Keep them coming.
And also,
More than like
Roach and Enzo, really, thank you, both of you, so much for joining me tonight and helping me out here.
Yeah, anytime.
Still a little bit green when doing some of these shows by myself, so you guys saved the day. I really appreciate it.
Love to jump in and
Well,
help out.
You couldn't have picked an easier guest for us to jump in on.
What are you talking about? He's right down my way. I was practically neighbors growing up with Mothman. I was all about it.
There you go.
Well, we're going to go ahead and close out the show. Just want to say the weekend is coming, and tomorrow at 3 o'clock Pacific time is First Floor Audio, of course. Go and see our buddy Lee play some amazing tunes. And I guess that's going to be it for tonight. Once again, thank you, everybody, for being here with us. We really, really appreciate it. Good night, everybody.
See y'all.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.